I'm Lorna Dueck, and this is CShift.
So we're kind of setting ourselves up for really inauthentic relationships. And I just think we should ask ourselves, why are we doing this? You start to confide in a robot and talk to them, and they say a little something back to you, enough to give you the feeling that there's somebody home. You have the feeling of connection, the illusion of friendship, without the demands of intimacy, without really there being anybody there.
They don't necessarily have the same morality or the same set of objectives or the same safeguards or checks and balances that a person has.
The futurists were right. What humans have done for generations, robots are taking over. Robotics have dominated industry for years, from mining to manufacturing, but now they're moving in on our social lives. Today, robot friends are being devised to care for the infirm. Robots are learning to drive cars and fly fighter jets. Artificial intelligence is making decisions in industries that affect all our lives. And now what it means to be human stands toe-to-toe with robotic geminoids and devices that are being created to store our thoughts and our essence for eternity.
Science and engineering have made way for a genuine robot revolution. Francis Jensen is a researcher at the Ontario Brain Institute, and he's here to guide us through this brave new world. Francis, welcome to Context. Great to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Laura.
Now, I'm kind of curious why the Brain Institute would be interested in robots, because they don't have brains. So what are you... I honestly didn't think they had brains.
That's a great question. Well, the Brain Institute is we're an organization that funds research across the province of Ontario. And so we don't actually do research at the Brain Institute itself, but we actually work with researchers across the province, at universities, at hospitals. Now, where robotics comes into place is when we work with industry partners who are interested at developing technologies to help patients who suffer from different disorders. So, for example, we've worked with a company called Beacon, B-K-I-N, and they've actually developed a tool to help patients who suffer from motor disorders to help diagnose their symptoms and find better treatments. Another form of
and that's a robotic tool that diagnoses better than a doctor does.
It helps diagnose, that's right. So it would do better than a doctor under certain conditions based on complex motor tasks. So this is a articulated robot with 2 arms, and it's called the kin arm, and allows patients to play games with this robot.
Is this a cognitive robot, or help us understand what a cognitive robot is?
So cognitive robotics is actually a field in the world of robotics, especially in the world of cognitive science. So cognitive scientists who try to understand the brain better will actually develop robots that work with mechanisms that are similar to what the brain would do. So for example, robots that integrate attention mechanisms, robots that integrate sensory and motor coordination, robots that also have a memory and the ability to learn. So all these components that are part of a cognitive, a brain, a human brain or even an animal brain, we would be able to model inside a robot to better test the theories that we have about how the brain works.
So our brains are breaking down, not good enough. A robot can be wired to replace those elements. Is this like artificial intelligence?
Artificial intelligence is really the study. It came really about in the mid-1950s. There was a big group that came together actually at Dalhousie University in the US in 1956 to be exact. And what they found is that we had an early idea about how the brain might work. We understood that neurons were inside the brain. We understood that studying animals and rats, for example, or horses and dogs, that they behaved a certain way. But what they came to realize is that we needed to understand more formally. How does this actually work in a way that we can describe it almost in a mathematical way. So artificial intelligence is really this approach that uses mathematics and computer science to try to understand how the brain works.
And we have tools of artificial intelligence that help us every day, like what?
That's true. So that's a very good, so there are many tools. There are tools, for example, when we order a book on a company website that give you different recommendations for other books that you might be interested in. AI technologies are now being used to be able to filter down what data is going to be relevant for those who are looking for new things.
Okay, so now help us understand what's an android and how is it being used today?
Andros, which means man from Latin, is really the idea of building robots that are sort of human-like. So an android is really a specific class of robot that allows us to look at how could robots interact with us in a better way? How could they be a bit more like us so that we can work with them and they could work with us? And so the idea, the field of android science and engineering is looking at how can we develop these agents that have a human form and can really interact with us in better ways.
And do you have any cautions or concerns about where we're going with robots? Human form, artificial intelligence?
There are some concerns I think that we have to have, as I think we have to be worried about the humans who are actually thinking about these things and who may be able to exploit robotics. So anything that has the ability to learn, to be able to interact and predict sort of the environment, but also take control of the environment, can be a potential, a hazard.
This is sounding like a sci-fi movie. So watch out for the robot makers and watch out for the people who are running the robots.
That's right. I think we need to have, there are definitely things that we need to put in place in terms of, the way the policies, safeguards, exactly. Sort of the way that we manage the development of robotics, the way that we even, the rules that we give them or that we allow robots to exist in need to be, we need to put some thinking into it.
And the time is now? Like now, that's why we're having this discussion, robots are here.
Earlier the better.
Are we going to decide, the earlier the better, the ethics on robots?
That's right.
All right.
Thank you.
Francis Jensen, scientist and researcher at the Ontario Brain Institute. It was world-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking who sounded the alarm on artificial intelligence. He recently told the BBC the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. I had the opportunity to ask Commander Chris Hadfield, former chief of robotics at NASA's astronaut office, his perspective on that.
If you allow, I don't know, the fox to guard the hen house, right? Foxes are smart. Foxes are clever animals, but they don't necessarily have the same morality or the same set of objectives or the same safeguards or checks and balances that a person has. And if you then give them authority to make decisions, you may or may not get the results that you expect. And if a computer gets to a level of intelligence where it can start to affect your life, then you really have to be careful giving that authority like, for example, if the anti-skid in your car had a brain of its own, if it didn't matter when you pushed on the pedal, if just your car braked when it thought it was time to brake, it would be completely inappropriate. Sometimes it would brake crazy, and sometimes you'd crash into things because it doesn't have the same set of objectives you do. And as computer intelligence gets more and more capable, we tend to rely on it more and more. Siri, tell me what is, and we kind of trust it, because it becomes almost human-seeming. And I think it's very seductive, where you think you can trust it because it seems to be human-like, but in truth, it doesn't have all of the subtlety and background of a human, and there will be times where they make bad decisions, and we need to follow Asimov's rules of robotics, and we need to somehow get that ingrained into them.
Still ahead on CShift. A word of caution on putting our trust in the artificial intelligence of our robotic devices. Well, it's time to head to the field to find out how you and I get to the point of trusting robots and what researchers are learning about robots trusting humans.
Here are some of the stories making headlines this week.
Voters turning their outrage into online worldwide trends.
Why healthcare workers kill.
The opioid crisis is a health crisis.
So how do we weed out the noise?
Well, this is an issue our next guest is an expert on.
We have a lineup of religious leaders from the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faith communities.
I'm Lorna Dueck.
And I'm Sheldon Neal.
And I'm Mollie Thomas.
And you're watching Context Live.
PureFlix.com is now available in Canada. Sign up today for your free 1-month trial and begin streaming over 3,500 titles.
It's from independent films to movies and short series.
Kids shows. Sign up for a free month. Give it a good try.
Watch your favorite content anywhere, anytime, like PureFlix original hit series Encounter. Enjoy the latest and best in faith and family entertainment. Available to you at the click of a button. Visit PureFlix.com and sign up for your free trial today. Brought to you by Crossroads.
We've seen it in movies. Man makes robot, and robot takes over mankind.
You are terminated.
As artificial intelligence becomes more and more a part of our world, are the movies right? Will robots one day pose a threat? David Harris Smith is the co-creator of Hitchbot, a robot he created that is designed to create a trusting bond between man and machine. But it's reversed. For David, he wants to know if the robot, or Hitchbot, can trust us as humans.
Here we have a very vulnerable machine that we can turn loose into the world, and it's entirely dependent upon human empathy to move, to accomplish its goals.
Hitchbot has been traveling all over the world, most recently across Germany and Canada. For David, it's important that machines can trust us.
We want to be able to release machines to operate outside of constant human supervision. That's the goal. In order to do so, there are situations where we're relying on people socially to understand the value of that machine, its function, its purpose, and to respect basically a piece of property that doesn't really have anyone out there to look after it.
An interesting concept. I wonder how Neil would feel about that.
In making a robot that has as its goal to hitchhike, to travel, to kind of throw itself at the mercy.
Greetings, I am Hitchbot. Please sit me down inside your car and plug me in. Refer to me as Hitchbot. Keep the radio quiet and the window by me closed. Avoid.
Yes, and Hitchbot actually has a lot of demands to make. So it does need to be appealing to people.
So what does David think the future will look like?
We can relate this question to other instances where human beings become very attached to their technologies, right? So their cell phones, their computers, their cars. I think there's been a kind of a long history of, technophilia, right? This idea of endowing or projection of human characteristics to our machines. And sometimes, both positive and negative. We do at times feel like our machines are out to thwart us, right when we most need them to behave.
Does David think that machines will become more human?
When I say I feel awe and you feel awe, we kind of assume that, I'm feeling it the same way you are, but we don't really know. It's like seeing a color. We are the designers of robots. We will be the programmers of the algorithms by which they run. Do we make the error, or do we, forget to write in the little bit of code that says, yes, it might be more efficient to produce paper clips without human beings around, but we don't want to do that. There needs to be, I think, an ongoing recognition that we are the designers of our technologies. At some point, those technologies might become the designers of human life. We will likely, that's a very likely scenario, that we will need robots and artificial intelligence to assist us in, say, the repair or the rejuvenation of the human body, or with some of our genetic projects.
We're pleased to welcome Dr. Brent Waters, Professor of Christian Social Ethics at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. Dr. Waters is joining us by Skype from his office in Evanston, Illinois. And Dr. Waters, we've seen the tasks that can be done by robots. What do you think robot technology will do to our emotional life?
I think over time it will diminish our emotional skills and make us increasingly insular. What I mean by that is that people disappoint and they irritate us. And I think what we might do is begin to use robots and artificial intelligence to create people, or at least replicas of people, who will not disappoint us, who will not irritate us. And increasingly what we will want to do is simply make other people in our image rather than letting them be who they are. One of the things that enriches human life is really seeing the other as other. And that other is always going to be a bit mysterious to us. Oscar Wilde once said something to the effect, only shallow people don't judge by appearance. And what he meant by that is that the invisible really isn't mysterious, it's the visible that's mysterious. And I think in losing that mystery of the other, we also lose a source of delight and joy in life.
Okay, we want to play you a clip from a documentary called Roboticize Me that probes that question. Watch this and then we'll have you comment.
Here in Japan, one man is breaking that barrier.
Hi, Professor Ishiguro. Thank you for seeing us. Don't take too much of your time. You seem very cold.
It is not me.
I see.
Nice to meet you.
Professor Hiroshi Ishiguro is a pioneer in the field of geminoids, robots that look more human than machine. You know, for his robotic twin, he even used hair from his own scalp.
And why did you create him?
The reason is I want to know what human is, right? And I want to understand what I am. So if we create our copy, we can observe ourselves objectively.
Well, there you have Japanese Professor Hiroshi Ishiguro making androids, very human-like robots, saying his work is really to study what it means to be human. For centuries, people have looked at Jesus Christ as a model for what it means to be human. What does that have, that technology really can't even duplicate in its worldview and its look?
You have to really ask the question as a Christian, something about the incarnation. What does it mean for the Word to become flesh, for God to become a human being? And in that very act, there's an affirmation again of our finitude, our mortality, our imperfections. And it means that, in a sense, we are affirmed as creatures that were created by God, not to be with machine-like perfection, but the very kinds of things that enrich our lives through the unanticipated, even the mistakes we make, I think, or eventually enriches our lives. I think that's what's being lost. There's a reverse of the incarnation, and the incarnation is the Word that becomes flesh. In this quest is now flesh is turned into data, which can be manipulated and duplicated in artificial means.
Well, a new word for me that this discussion raises is transhumanism. It's an issue of technological immortality, a future where our brain, like you say, can be turned into data, loaded into a machine. What's your take on that transhumanism idea of technological immortality?
Well, I think transhumanism, interestingly enough, is really becoming almost another religion offering salvation. And what it's trying to offer is an ability to overcome the finitude and mortality that makes us human by offering immortality as endless time. I think right now there's three strategies among the transhumanists. One would be called biological immortality, in which we think we can tinker with the genetics and eventually stop the aging process or overcome it. That doesn't work. There's bionic immortality, which is a combination of flesh and machine, artificial hearts, artificial blood, things like that. Then finally, is what I would call virtual immortality, is precisely what you're saying. It's assumed that the digital information, which constitutes our personality, can be uploaded into a computer and then downloaded into either artificial programs or robotic hosts. Now, what this really assumes is that basically you and I are nothing but a series of zeros and ones. And the host really doesn't matter. So our bodies are not very good hosts for what we are. We have to find a better one. I think there again, the danger of that is to disregard what it means to be an embodied being, an embodied creature. In some sense, it's a way of really saying we despise how we were created.
Okay, now let's take a look at how robots are currently being used for well-being. Watch this from the doc Roboticize Me.
For Sherry Turkle, a robo-companion raises some unsettling questions.
So we're kind of setting ourselves up for really inauthentic relationships. And I just think we should ask ourselves, why are we doing this? If you start to confide in a robot and talk to them, and they say a little something back to you, enough to give you the feeling that there's somebody home, you have the feeling of connection, the illusion of friendship, without the demands of intimacy, without really there being anybody there.
That was Sherry Turkle, the author of Alone Together, Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. Dr. Waters, what is the social cost of having robots as companions, as we just saw?
I think what this does is exacerbates that situation and relieves us of the responsibility to provide care. So I can see some benefits from it, but I think the danger is that essentially this is a way of sequestering people in need of care at the end of life. I think at the other end, there's some alarming trends as well, that youth and young adults are beginning to prefer artificial companions. I remember reading one of Turkle's books where there's a chilling phrase by a young adult who says, "People are dangerous, robots are safe." So this, and again, I think it's an approach to saying I can control my life better if I can control the companions and create these companions, and essentially they become mere reflections of who we are rather than people who are other than us.
Well, and if we are facing a diminishing sense of self amid robot technology, artificial intelligence, even our own dependence on the screens of our technology, how would you advise we recover what it does mean to be human?
Well, I think three things come immediately to mind. One's very simple, is make the machines our servants and don't let them master us. So turn the mobile phone off at dinner. Open the inbox when you want and not be a slave to every email coming in immediately. I think secondly is a recovery almost of a technological Sabbath, of really taking a rest from the machines and really begin to discover what does it mean to interact with other people. And thirdly, I would say rediscovering the art of civil conversation, of really taking the time to talk to people and not to simply be dependent upon texting, on emailing, because I think it is in the give and take of a face-to-face conversation we begin to discover each other as human beings.
Well, Dr. Waters, thank you so much for joining us on Context.
My pleasure.
Here are some of the stories making headlines this week.
Voters turning their outrage into online worldwide trends.
Why healthcare workers killed.
The opioid crisis is a health crisis.
So how do we weed out the noise?
Well, this is an issue our next guest is an expert on.
We have a lineup of religious leaders from the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faith communities.
I'm Lorna Dueck.
And I'm Sheldon Neal.
And I'm Mollie Thomas.
And you're watching Context Live.
PureFlix.com is now available in Canada. Sign up today for your free 1-month trial and begin streaming over 3,500 titles.
It's from independent films to movies and short series.
Kids shows. Sign up for a free month. Give it a good try.
Watch your favorite content anywhere, anytime, like PureFlix original hit series Encounter. Enjoy the latest and best in faith and family entertainment. Available to you at the click of a button. Visit PureFlix.com and sign up for your free trial today. Brought to you by Crossroads.
Our future relationship with robots is up to the next generation. This is what happens when computer science class and shop class get together to do extracurricular activity. It's hands-on learning of how to create a robot. On a set launch date, thousands of students got this video and a package of rules. Just 6 weeks to create a robot that can only cost $4,000 and must be ready to compete in Recycle Rush.
I did it because originally I had been very into robotics when I was younger, and I thought this would be a great opportunity. And I'd always looked up to these guys as a young kid. And now when I do it, I feel like I'm part of a team. I feel like I have a family when doing this. Like I'm a home away from home. And it's really fun, and not only that, it is a little bit stressful, but there's a lot of educational opportunities opened up for me because of this.
And so where did you start to look up to these guys? Like, how did you know about robots were out there in school?
A couple of kids from Lego, the Lego company came, they showed us the Mindstorm kit, and that really interested me. And when I researched this when I was younger, I found FRC, and I'm like, I want to do this when I'm older. And I thought, this is something I really want to do.
So this is kind of like after Lego, you then start this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
From the moment this is started, it's 24/7 in your mind. You have to get parts to make sure that kids are busy on the days that they are here. You have to order parts. They have to be here really fast. It puts a world reality to this. There is a definite deadline. It's not imaginary. It's a do or die deadline. It has to be done.
And what do you think that does for the kids to have a real life deadline?
I think it helps them. You know, it's a bit stressful, but that's, you know, in real life it is stressful for certain things. But it's a kind of a good stress.
No chance that robots will replace thinking here. This is a fascinating application of students applying their different interests to create something out of nothing. And it all has to be done under pressure.
This is our second last day. Let's try getting things organized and done today. We need a lot of little stuff. The big stuff is all done. We have some that resembles a robot. Now we have to make it work.
Pressure, but great scholarship perks if you have your eye on college or university.
There are hundreds, maybe even 1,000 scholarships available. The Rose Holman Institute of Technology, they have scholarships available for $10,000 a year for 4 years.
But everything has to be created.
The robot is the most insignificant part of the whole thing. Even though we talk about robotics, it's the most insignificant part. It's how do you bring all these 38 kids and mentors together to have a common goal. The common goal is that robot, but it's not the most important thing. You know, it's all these things that these kids are getting out of it.
And then there's the initial test run.
Nice.
Something tells me it's just the beginning of how these students will be putting robots to use. Would you want a robot to take care of your parents?
Oh yes, definitely. If I've had my hands on the robot and I know the robot and I feel like I have a connection with it, then yeah, I would love for them to take care of my mom and dad when they're older. Remind them when to have their medication, when my dad needs to do some work. He'll need help with his computer stuff. So if the robot can help him with that, that'd be great.
We're going to go to Christina Crook, who used to work with us and has written a great book about what happens when you need to reboot. And Christina, you had to reboot your life a bit to go home and raise young children. And along that path, you wrote a book called The Joy of Missing Out, Finding Balance in a Wired World. What's your best advice for how we recover our relationship with ourselves when artificial intelligence, like my smartphone, kind of takes over? What's your best advice for getting a grip on that?
So we can talk a lot about tips and tricks. There were some great ones that have come up already, you know, treating the phone in particular, your computer like a tool, you know, not letting it take over you, but, you know, using it for a specific purpose, taking it out, and then putting it away when you're finished. But for me, it comes down to the joy of life, what gives us deeper meaning. So there's an amazing practice the Jesuits have developed called the examinative consciousness, and it challenges you at the end of each day to ask what was most life-giving and what was most life-taking. And as you hone in on these things each evening, your life will begin to orient itself towards the things that are most life-giving. So in my book, The Joy of Missing Out, it's all about that. It's not about, you know, putting limits or being anti-technology. It's about what actually gives us meaning in life. And it is not the easy technologies. It's not our smartphones and the easy check-ins all the time, but it's actually the things that we work the hardest at, the things that we sink our teeth into and give our all to. You know, raising a child, running a marathon, you know, working really hard on a project at work, that blood, sweat, and tears that's soaked into that project or that life or that relationship, those are the things that give us most joy and meaning. So I'm all about focusing on those things more than being doom and gloom and worrying about the future.
Thanks for watching CShift. I'm Lorna Dueck. Well, this is an issue our next guest is an expert on.
We have a lineup of religious leaders from the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faith communities.
I'm Lorna Dueck.
And I'm Sheldon Neal.
And I'm Mollie Thomas.
And you're watching Context Live.